I am a big fan of diagramming, making or drawing diagrams that represent and show the architecture of my application, the system I am working with. And I recently found PlantUML, which I think is really an awesome, excellent possibility to use a kind of markup a language, and the system automatically creates nice diagrams from these scripts. Let's see how it works. First, in Visual Studio. Visual Studio has excellent PlantUML. This is what has been installed. Rich PlantUML support for Visual Studio. That is how it works. Is quite straightforward. First, it was quite how to say, challenging to understand the whole concept, because we have a script. Let me show you. For example, here is one of the file. This one is a PUML, that is PlantUML. The file name can have also the PlantUML suffix. So therefore this is the description, and then it can be visualized when I open this split editor, right? No, sorry, let me just press Alt D, which opens a preview screen, and here you go. And the way it works, when I open the settings for PlantUML, plant, yes, here, yes, here is the PlantUML server which we want to use. Actually, it also supports local GraphViz possibility, as it described here. But here I use PlantUML server, and here is the URL. So this PlantUML URL returns an image of this script. So this is one of the possibility, and this is near real time. For example, let's check. When I enter X, and after a couple of seconds or sub-seconds, the image is updated immediately. And an excellent and Alt S is when you save. When we save, we have here you see a difference. So therefore the diagram has a very nice tracking in the repository, in the Git repository, GitHub. These diagrams could also be included in MD files either. Let me show the README file that we have here. This is the README file. When I open, when I open this, this is an embedded text. So normally this is not displayed. However, when we are here and when I press Alt D, it opens the PlantUML review and it shows this part. So when I just click over anywhere else, it doesn't update, but when I come here and again I just press exec, it's exactly the same. But the issue is, so I definitely wouldn't recommend to use this syntax because it is not displayed automatically on the GitHub. So when you commit these changes, and when we have a look at the where is my let me open my GitHub repository. Yes, experimenting. Here you go, and then I go into this essentials. I have already committed a version of this, and when you come here, this is just displayed like so. However, when there is a so that is GitHub natively doesn't support rendering the PlantUML blocks in the Markdown. However, there is a possibility to use the Plant URL proxy service as nicely documented in this guy's blog, PlantUML Basics, and then here he explains nicely that for example, this is the image syntax, and then you can include a file, and then with this image syntax using the proxy like so, and then this displays the diagram like so. Let me show. For example, here is a example. This is the Markdown cached image. This is just the text because this is the Markdown text, and here is the plantuml.com plantuml proxy source file, and then this actually the raw file of the text of the PUML file. So in my system I had successful with only the cache equals no. This is also important, and the way it works when I come to experimenting with Android, so we have here the file architecture PUML. Actually, this is the file which is visualized here with this link. Let me show you. For example, when I click this file, of course, this is the page which is displayed. You see, this is just a web page. However, we need the raw. So this is the URL we should send over to the PlantUML proxy, and then it renders this file, returns a nice image file. So that is the link of this file. You see this, how it should be used. When I come back to see the source code of this, let me just get rid of this. Here is my example architecture diagram, and then comes the proxy, cache no, and then my GitHub repository, the full path, and with architecture.puml. So this is the way I suggest to use this PUML. This is an extra nice thing that in Microsoft Visual Studio Code you have the option using the Alt D to preview images like this one. Let me just open and then Alt D like so. So while we are editing, we have an immediate visualization here. This is also possible in Android Studio either. Fortunately, we have I have two plugins, preferences, and then the plugins I have here. One is install plugins. I have here the Markdown navigator. Unfortunately, actually its documentation says that it supports uh, PlantUML, but in practice I wasn't able to find out how the hell it supports, how it renders, but fortunately we also have a PlantUML integration uh, um, plugin, and then from Eugene Steinberg, and then this works pretty nice. That is, and also let me show you that the markdown settings are here, but unfortunately I didn't find any reference to the PlantUML URLs or using anything. And here we have also in the PlantUML other settings. When I click here, this was important that I had to install GraphViz, otherwise it doesn't work. So this PlantUML works only with this local GraphViz executable, and this is the dot. So I have downloaded, you see, into USR local seller GraphViz. I use the brew install GraphViz command on a terminal, and it installed, and this is the dot file, which is actually the entry point of the command for visualization. So this is the GraphViz together with the PlantUML. So actually this is the way it works. And then, however, in Android Studio there is no way to visualize this block of text, so definitely I don't recommend this. I will delete shortly. However, this can also be, of course, rendered. So when I just click over here, check out this, here you go. So even in Android Studio with the Markdown editor, we have the possibility to visualize when we use this syntax as I have explained. So that was the first thing I wanted to explain, that I started using PlantUML for explaining and documenting the architecture of my application. The second thing I wanted to explain that I love quite okay the view model and live data components from Android architecture, the Jet pack library. However, I originally and initially I didn't like at all the data binding. However, I found a very interesting article, a blog post here. Let me show you. Okay, so I don't need this anymore. And yes, this was no more find view by ID. So from 2016, 3 years ago, from George Mount. Actually, this George Mount wrote a series of articles about Android data binding, and then I think all of these articles are worth reading. So the very first one was this no more find by view, and here actually what he explains, the first of all, that we have to set the data binding enabled settings, then we have to sandwich all our layout files with the layout, every layout files, not only the main layout, also the fragment layouts. Every layout should be sandwiched if we want to generate a binding classes for these files. And then here explains how to use these bindings. And here came, which caught my eye, I've never seen this aspect of the hello world binding. Check out this. When you of course hello world binding is created, and then when you have a binding object, you know, like so, then you will have in the generated code tags for the items, the components from the layout file. And then these are of course type safe. So as seen, check out this here. The find by view ID returns a view, and if you really want to use it safe mode, you have to apply a completely unsafe text view cast, and which is really terrible and ugly. So this is a lot cleaner, because this is immediately type safe, and then the compiler helps in this regard too. And then that's what I loved tremendously. So therefore, let me show maybe other comments. Okay, so this was the Markdown open source. Okay, we don't need this anymore. This was so there are some examples how to use the PlantUML. Okay, and then I rewrote my application according to this data binding first, as it was suggested. Let me just go back to the Android view. In the Gradle module, I enabled data binding enable true, as was requested, and then I sandwiched my fragment layout as well as main the activity layout and the fragment layout. This is the fragment layout with the layout tag, like so. And then in the code, here came the interesting part. This was the alt text, and then I used the main activity. This was generated by the Android Studio. Main activity binding. This is how it should be set, the context view, and then yes, in this case we didn't use the binding at all. This was just to initialize it. However, in the fragment, when I have the main fragment here, I replaced, first of all I had to create a main fragment binding class, reference, a private variable, a member variable, and this is how I inflate. Again, very interesting that in the main activity we should use the data binding util, set content view, passing over the activity and the identifier. This is the way the activity is enabled. However, for the fragment we have the option to use the generated main fragment binding, and it has a function called inflate, which uses the inflator, the container, and then attached to root is false. So therefore you don't have to define the ID, that the ID is inferred here. And then interestingly, the lifecycle owner, which is in this case the fragment class itself, should be defined, and then we should return the root, which is the view, should be returned from this onCreate view. Interesting that this set lifecycle owner, why it should be initialized by hand. So remember to define this lifecycle owner. I don't know what would happen if I forgotten to set this lifecycle owner, but anyhow. And then on activity created, most of the code can be deleted. For example, I don't need anymore the private variables, because the binding, the main fragment binding, has all the fields which I had in my text, in my fragment. Here is the result text, text view, dollar text, edit text, and a convert button, all, and then a dollar label text. So everything are available right away in this Java generated Java file as member fields. So, and type safe, and you can immediately. So therefore this is a very nice and easy replacement of the regular findViewById function. This is practically a very small feature, but the first steps. So after these first steps, I think this data binding could be a lot more reasonable, and I'm definitely going to follow the rest of the tutorials this guy George Mount was writing about, and then I may change my mind, and eventually I might find data binding quite useful, because in that case I would have view model, live data, and data binding included in my tool set. Again, let me just give you a demonstration that it really works. Let me just start my virtual machine. So in the next video I'm going to use this example together with the syntax, in the data binding syntax within the XML files. It takes a while, it takes some time to rebuild the application. Normally it's quite fast after the first rebuild. Okay, APKs are being installed, and here is the example. When I just press convert, no value is displayed. When I enter 100, okay, 100, and I press convert. Here you go. So that was it, my friends, and I think the next video is going to be interesting, and the next series of video about data binding.